I can't believe you brought that cheap velvet box into my house, Ethan, Victoria Sterling said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Look at you. You look like a valet who stole a jacket. I tightened my grip on the small velvet ring box hidden inside my pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs. Surrounding us were dozens of Chicago's highest society members, all watching with amused eyes. Victoria, please, I said, stepping closer to my fiancée. Chloe and I agreed tonight was the night. We've been together for years. I worked extra shifts for 2 years to buy this ring. Chloe didn't step toward me. Instead, she adjusted her silk designer gown and took a step back, aligning herself beside Julian Vance, a notorious playboy whose family ran Vance Capital. 4 years of living in a cramped apartment, Ethan, Chloe said, her voice entirely cold and devoid of affection. 4 years of waiting for you to become someone. I'm tired of waiting. Chloe, what are you saying? I whispered, my chest burning. I paid off your graduate tuition. I gave up my own business dreams so your mother's boutique could stay afloat during the audit. Julian let out a smooth, arrogant laugh, sliding an arm around Chloe's waist. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned into him. You paid for her tuition with pocket change, beggar. Julian sneered, swirling the champagne in his glass. Chloe belongs in high society, not folding laundry in a rental unit with a nobody. Is this a joke, Chloe? I asked, ignoring Julian as my voice cracked. Tell me this is a sick joke. It's not a joke, Ethan, Chloe replied, looking me dead in the eye. Julian proposed to me an hour ago with a 5-carat diamond. He bought me a house in Gold Coast. What do you have to offer me? A modest life? I want an empire. An empire? I let out a breathless, bitter laugh. I gave you my whole life. I worked 16 hours a day so you could have everything you wanted, and it still wasn't enough, Victoria interjected, snapping her fingers sharply toward the entrance. You were a convenient placeholder while Chloe established her social standing, Ethan. But the fun is over. 2 massive, suited security guards stepped up beside me, grabbing both of my arms with unyielding grips. Wait, I yelled, struggling against their hold. Victoria, let me speak to her. Chloe, look at me. Get this trash out of my mansion, Victoria commanded loudly so the entire ballroom could hear. Throw his pathetic bags out of the guest house while you're at it. The crowd erupted into light giggles and hushed whispers as the guards yanked me backward. Julian smirked, raising his glass to me in a mocking toast, while Chloe turned her back entirely, leaning up to kiss Julian's cheek. Chloe, I roared, but the heavy double doors of the Sterling mansion slammed shut in my face. Rain poured down from the black sky, instantly soaking my suit as the guards dragged me down the long gravel driveway. They shoved me hard against the wet pavement outside the iron gates, tossing a battered canvas duffel bag into the mud beside me. And stay out, loser. One guard grunted before the gates locked with a heavy metallic clack. I sat on the freezing, wet asphalt, gasping for breath as water washed over my face. My knees were scraped, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I reached into the soggy duffel bag, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of an old silver locket, the only thing my late mother had left me before she passed away in a charity hospital. I snapped the locket open in the dim glow of the street lamp. Inside was a tiny, faded picture of my mother, smiling softly. I tried, Mom. I whispered into the empty, rainy night, my tears mixing with the downpour. I gave them everything. I destroyed myself for them. For years of endless sacrifices, sleepless nights, missed meals, and maxed-out credit cards. All to build a future for a woman who viewed me as nothing more than a temporary servant. Victoria's sharp laughter still echoed in my ears, cutting deeper than the freezing wind. Hey, Ethan! A pair of bright headlights blinded me as a beat-up pickup truck screeched to a halt along the curb. The door flew open, and my best friend, Marcus Reed, jumped out holding a large umbrella. Ethan, what the hell happened to you, man? Marcus yelled over the roar of the rain, rushing over to pull me up from the pavement. I got your text, but Jesus, you're soaked to the bone. She threw me out, Marcus, I said, my voice hollow and flat as I allowed him to pull me toward the truck. Chloe, she's with Julian Vance. Marcus froze, his jaw dropping in pure shock. Julian Vance? The guy who tried to buy out my repair shop last month? Are you kidding me? She traded 4 years of my life for a diamond ring, I said, staring blankly at the wet pavement as Marcus helped me into the passenger seat. Her mother had security drag me out in front of everyone. Marcus slammed the passenger door shut, ran around to the driver's side, and climbed in, cranking the heater to high. He handed me an old towel from the back seat. Those monsters, Marcus muttered, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. After everything you did for their family? You paid off Victoria's store debts, Ethan. It doesn't matter anymore, I whispered, clutching my mother's silver locket tightly in my trembling fist. To them, I was just a beggar who didn't know his place. So, what are you going to do now? Marcus asked softly, looking at me with deep concern as he shifted the truck into drive. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror, soaked, bruised, and broken. I don't know, Marcus. I honestly don't know if I have anything left. Drink this, Ethan, Marcus said, shoving a steaming mug of black coffee into my hands. I sat on the edge of the worn sofa in his cramped apartment, staring blankly at the floor. The sound of rain beating against the window pane filled the silence. I still can't wrap my head around it, Marcus continued, pacing back and forth across the faded rug. For years, man. You paid off Victoria's debts. You bought Chloe's tuition books. You practically ran yourself into the ground for them. I thought she loved me, Marcus. I whispered, my throat burning. I thought if I worked hard enough, it would mean something. They used you, Ethan, Marcus said fiercely, stopping in front of me. Victoria treated you like an unpaid maid. And Chloe just wanted someone to pay her bills until a richer guy came along. Julian Vance is a snake. I gave her my mother's silver locket, I said, my voice cracking as I pulled the cold metal object from my pocket. She didn't even look at it. She just laughed. Forget her, Marcus urged, resting a heavy hand on my shoulder. You're staying here with me. Tomorrow morning, we'll go to my auto shop, get you set up with some decent clothes, and figure out your next move. You're free from those vultures now. I don't feel free, I admitted, looking at my reflection in the dark coffee. I feel completely hollow. The morning sun broke through the storm clouds, casting a sharp glare over the oily pavement outside Marcus's garage. I was helping him sort through a box of spare engine parts when a heavy, sleek black limousine pulled up along the curb. Marcus dropped his wrench, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. Whoa, what is a high-end Maybach doing in this neighborhood? The driver's door opened, and a uniformed man quickly stepped out to open the rear passenger door. An elderly woman stepped out, holding a silver-topped cane. She wore a tailored charcoal wool coat, her white hair styled immaculately, and her sharp blue eyes scanned the garage with terrifying authority. Ethan Brooks, her deep, resonant voice echoed through the garage. I stepped forward cautiously, setting down a steel wrench. Yes, that's me. Can I help you, ma'am? You certainly don't look like much right now, she said smoothly, stepping over a puddle of oil without breaking eye contact. Though I suppose surviving Victoria Sterling's greed leaves quite a stain. I frowned, my chest tightening. How do you know Victoria? Marcus shifted beside me, stepping in front of the counter. Look, lady, if you're working for the Sterlings, Ethan doesn't want anything to do with them. Silence, boy, the woman commanded, raising a single gloved finger. I am not working for the Sterlings. The Sterlings work for me. Or rather, they leech off my family's legacy. Who are you? I demanded, my hands clenching into fists. She stopped 2 feet away from me, her sharp eyes softening just a fraction as she studied my face. My name is Eleanor Sterling-Vance. I am the matriarch of the Sterling-Vance Global Enterprise. My heart skipped a beat. Vance? As in Julian Vance? Julian is my late husband's foolish nephew. Eleanor spat with total disdain. A greedy boy who squanders money he didn't earn. But you are someone very different, Ethan. I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. I'm just an orphan. My mother passed away in a state charity ward 10 years ago. Your mother was Evelyn Vance, Eleanor declared, her voice firm and unwavering. My husband's only legitimate daughter. She ran away 20 years ago to protect you from corporate infighting. changing your last name to Brooks to keep you hidden from vultures like Victoria Sterling. I stumbled back a step, knocking against the metal workbench. What? No, that's impossible. My mom was a schoolteacher. She was a Vance, Eleanor corrected softly. And you, Ethan, are not a penniless orphan. You are my late husband's direct blood grandson. Marcus gasped beside me, his jaw dropping. Ethan, is this lady for real? This is a joke, I blurted out, bitter laughter escaping my lips. Victoria Sterling just threw me out into the rain 12 hours ago because I was too poor for her daughter. Victoria Sterling is an ignorant fool, Eleanor said coldly, tapping her cane sharply against the concrete floor. She believes her family owns the Sterling estate. What she does not realize is that the entire property, along with Vance Capital's operating lines, is completely funded by the Master Sterling-Vance Family Trust. And what does that have to do with me? I asked, my breath catching in my throat. My legal team finalized the terms of my husband's will yesterday afternoon, Eleanor explained, reaching into her coat to pull out a crisp, gold-embossed document. Under the terms of the Master Trust, the entirety of the Sterling-Vance fortune, worth over $4 billion, passes exclusively to the direct bloodline. She held the document out toward me. I stared at the gold seal, my mind spinning violently. Julian Vance has been parading around Chicago claiming he is the heir. Eleanor continued, a cold, ruthless smile touching her lips. Victoria and Chloe dumped you because they thought Julian was their ticket to ultimate wealth. They have no idea that Julian's family firm is currently 3 months behind on debt repayments to my trust. So, Ethan owns their debt? Marcus asked in disbelief, pointing a finger between me and the paper. Ethan owns everything, Eleanor corrected sharply. The mansion they live in, the luxury cars Julian drives, the boutique business Victoria runs. All of it belongs to the Master Trust. And as of midnight last night, Ethan, you are the sole trustee. I stared at Eleanor, the cold metal of my mother's silver locket pressing tightly against my palm inside my pocket. The humiliation from last night, the laughter, the rain, Chloe's cold eyes, flashed through my mind like fire. They threw me out like trash. I whispered, my voice growing steady and dark. Then it is time to collect the trash, my boy, Eleanor said gently, extending her hand to me. Step into the car, Ethan. Let us show Chicago who you really are. The leather armchair in the private executive suite felt absurdly plush compared to Marcus's worn couch. I sat quietly as Arthur Hayes, a sharp-eyed lawyer in a charcoal suit, spread 3 thick leather binders across the mahogany desk. Everything is verified, Mr. Brooks, Arthur said, pointing his gold pen at the signature lines. Or rather, Mr. Vance, as Evelyn's son, you hold sole beneficiary rights. Sole rights? I asked, leaning forward. What about Julian? Eleanor chuckled quietly from her seat beside the window. Julian's branch has survived on allowance, Ethan. Arthur, explain the debt structures. Of course, Arthur said, sliding a ledger toward me. Julian's company, Vance Capital, borrowed $60 million from your trust to stay afloat. Additionally, Victoria Sterling's boutique line has a $5 million credit line tied to the estate mortgage. You own both notes. I stared at the numbers, my heart hammering. If I sign these papers, I control their lives. You control their debts, Ethan, Eleanor corrected smoothly. They can be crushed or spared at your command. Is this really what I want? I muttered to myself, rubbing my temples. I could just take a quiet settlement, move away, and leave Chicago behind. I don't need revenge. Arthur placed a heavy gold fountain pen directly into my hand. If you walk away, Julian will default, and Victoria will blame you for stealing Evelyn's legacy. They won't stop mocking you, Ethan. Power isn't just about money, it's about protection. Arthur is right, Eleanor added, her eyes flashing with cold intensity. You sacrificed 4 years for people who discarded you in the mud. Taking your rightful place isn't revenge, Ethan. It is justice. I looked down at the gold pen. The memory of Chloe's cold laugh echoed in my ears, alongside Victoria calling me a valet. They had crushed my dignity without a second thought. Where do I sign? I asked, my voice steadying. Right here, Arthur indicated, pointing to the final page. Initial next to the trust transfer, then full signature at the bottom. I brought the nib to the paper and signed my real name in clear, bold strokes. Ethan Vance. It is done, Arthur declared, pulling the documents back into his leather portfolio. As of this moment, you are the chief trustee of Sterling-Vance Global. Meanwhile, across town at the high-end Peninsula Hotel, champagne glasses clinked in a private dining room. To our future, Julian, Chloe said, raising her glass with a radiant smile, the 5-carat diamond sparkling on her ring finger. I still can't believe how quickly everything came together. Julian laughed arrogantly, slumping back in his velvet seat. I told you, babe, Ethan was a dead end. I run Vance Capital. I have access to unlimited liquidity. And my mother is ecstatic, Chloe added, leaning over to kiss his cheek. Victoria was so relieved when we kicked Ethan out. He was holding us back from real wealth. He was a parasite, Julian sneered, sipping his wine. Living in your guest house, pretending he belonged in our world. He's probably working in some garage right now. Speaking of finances, sweetie, Chloe said gently, setting her glass down. Mom said the boutique's expansion loan needs your signature tomorrow morning. The bank said there was a minor administrative pause on the trust line. Julian waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about administrative pauses, Chloe. My family's trust handles millions every day. The board meeting is set for Friday. I'll approve your mom's loan the second I take formal control. You're amazing, Julian, Chloe purred, wrapping her arms around his neck. I knew I made the right choice. Back in the penthouse suite, Arthur tapped his tablet screen, pulling up a financial monitor. Julian just attempted to clear a $2 million credit withdrawal for his engagement party at the Peninsula, Mr. Vance, Arthur reported with a thin smile. Block it, I said without hesitation. Already done, Arthur replied, tapping the screen once. The payment has been flagged for manual trustee authorization. His card will decline in about 10 seconds. Eleanor smiled softly, raising her teacup toward me. A modest beginning, Ethan. How does it feel to hold the pen? It feels strange, I admitted, looking at my reflection in the dark glass window, looking out over the city skyline. For 4 years, I asked for their approval. I worked myself to exhaustion just to be seen as worthy. And now? Eleanor asked. Now they will have to ask me, I said, my chest expanding with a calm, unshakable confidence. When is the annual board meeting? Friday at 9 in the morning, Arthur answered. Julian expects to be named managing trustee by default because he thinks he's the only heir left. Let him celebrate tonight, I said, turning away from the window. Let him buy her all the diamonds he wants. On Friday morning, I'm walking into that boardroom. Will you announce your name immediately? Eleanor inquired, watching me closely. No, I replied, a cold smile forming on my face. I want Victoria and Chloe to explain to the board why they need my money first. I want them to make their pitch to the anonymous trustee. Ruthless, Eleanor noted approvingly. Just like your grandfather. Not ruthless, grandmother. I corrected softly, pulling my mother's silver locket from my pocket and placing it on the desk. Just accurate. Arthur gathered his papers and stood up, bowing slightly. I will prepare the legal summons for Friday morning, Mr. Vance. Everything will be ready. Thank you, Arthur, I said, shaking his hand. I stood alone in the center of the suite, looking out over Chicago as the night lights began to flicker on across the skyscrapers. The heartbroken, bleeding guy from the wet pavement was gone. The game had officially changed. Stand straight, Ethan, Marcus said, adjusting the collar of my bespoke charcoal wool suit in the fitting suite. You look like $1 billion, man. Literally. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. Gone was the exhausted, scuffed-up guy who worked extra shifts to buy a modest ring. In his place stood a man with sharp posture, tailored lines, and quiet authority. It feels strange wearing a suit that costs more than my old car, I admitted, running my thumb over the polished brass cufflink. You earned this, Marcus said, stepping back with a grin. And honestly, watching you take control of your life is the best thing that's happened all year. But listen, my guys at the garage saw Julian Vance last night outside the downtown club. What was he doing? I asked, turning to face him. He got into a huge shouting match with the valet because his black card got declined. Marcus chuckled. Apparently, he was trying to buy bottle service for Chloe's friends, and the transaction failed twice. He ended up screaming at Chloe in front of everyone. That's just the beginning, I said softly. Arthur blocked all unapproved trust dispensations. Julian's liquid cash was built entirely on credit lines he assumed he owned. Meanwhile, inside the dining room of the Sterling mansion, the mood was far from celebratory. Julian, what do you mean your corporate credit line is paused? Victoria demanded, slamming her coffee cup onto the saucer. The suppliers for my boutique expansion are demanding a $500,000 deposit by noon today. Calm down, Victoria, Julian snapped, running a hand through his messy hair. He looked pale and stressed, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. It's just a routine administrative hold. The bank is doing an audit on the master trust. A routine audit? Chloe interjected, her voice rising in panic. Julian, you promised me we were moving into the penthouse next week. Yesterday, my debit card was declined at the salon, and now Mom's business account is frozen. I said, quiet down. Julian yelled, slamming his hand onto the table so hard the silverware rattled. Do you think I like being embarrassed at the club? Some anonymous trustee took over the family fund 2 days ago and locked all secondary accounts. An anonymous trustee? Victoria asked, her face turning pale. Who could possibly have authority over the Vance family trust? My late uncle's legal estate, Julian muttered angrily. They called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at Vance Tower. I have to go in front of the board and request a formal cash release. Then you better get that money, Julian, Victoria warned, leaning across the table with sharp eyes. If my boutique line goes under because of your frozen accounts, this engagement is over. Don't threaten me, Victoria, Julian shouted, standing up from his chair. You and your daughter came crawling to me because you were broke. Don't forget who pays for this house. Chloe stared at Julian in absolute shock, her hands trembling. Julian, how can you talk to my mother like that? Ethan never raised his voice at us. Not once. Then go back to Ethan. Julian sneered, picking up his jacket. Oh, wait. You threw him into the rain. He's living in a dirty garage while I'm trying to save our business. See you at the board meeting tomorrow, Victoria. You better hope this new trustee is feeling generous. Back at my private office in Vance Tower, Arthur Hayes knocked lightly on the mahogany door before stepping inside. The trap is set, Mr. Vance, Arthur reported, placing a leather-bound financial report on my desk. Victoria Sterling's boutique suppliers have officially issued a notice of default. Her business will go into liquidation by 5 o'clock tomorrow if she doesn't secure $5 million. And Julian? I asked, looking up from the documents. Julian's firm, Vance Capital, owes $40 million in short-term commercial paper that matures at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Arthur replied with a precise smile. If the master trust does not cover the debt, his company faces immediate bankruptcy. They're coming to the board meeting out of pure desperation, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. Precisely, Arthur nodded. Victoria submitted an urgent petition an hour ago, begging the anonymous trustee for an emergency bailout package. She even attached a personal note stating that her family's social standing depends on this approval. I let out a short, cold laugh. Social standing, that's all she ever cared about. When I was paying her debts, she treated me like a servant. Now that she doesn't know who holds the pen, she begs. Will you accept her petition? Arthur asked, watching my reaction closely. I will hear her presentation in front of the entire board, I stated firmly, along with Chloe and Julian. Marcus knocked on the open door and walked into the office holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He looked around the sleek glass office in awe. Man, this place is incredible, Marcus said, handing me a cup. I just got off the phone with my shop assistant. He said Victoria's personal driver was at the gas station trying to put $20 on a credit card, and that declined too. The golden cage is cracking, Marcus, I said, taking a sip of the warm coffee. Are you ready for tomorrow, Ethan? Marcus asked, his tone turning serious. Seeing them face to face, it's going to be heavy. I spent 4 years feeling small around them, Marcus, I said, looking out the floor-to-ceiling glass window at the Chicago skyline below. I thought I was worthless because I couldn't buy them luxury suits or diamonds. But tomorrow, they will finally see who is actually holding everything together. They have no idea what's coming, Arthur added, closing his portfolio. The board meeting is set for 9 o'clock sharp in boardroom A. Good, I said, my voice resolute and calm. Let them wait in the hallway first. Let them feel what it's like to wonder if they have a future. The heavy mahogany doors of boardroom A swung open, and I watched through the double-paned smart glass of the adjoining suite as Victoria, Chloe, and Julian filed into the executive suite. Victoria adjusted her pearl necklace with trembling hands, while Julian repeatedly smoothed his tie, his face pale with stress. "Remember, Julian," Victoria whispered loudly, her voice trembling. "We need $5 million cleared today, or the boutique goes into full liquidation by 5 p.m. "I know what we need, Victoria," Julian hissed, pulling out a chair. "Just let me handle the board. The anonymous trustee has to approve the credit line. They won't let Vance Capital default over $40 million. Chloe sat beside him, clutching her designer handbag tightly to her chest. "Julian, are you sure this trustee will agree? What if they say no?" "They won't say no, Chloe," Julian insisted, though sweat glistened along his forehead. "We are the core family branch. Who else would inherit control?" Arthur Hayes stepped out from my side office first, carrying a thick leather binder. Behind him, Matriarch Eleanor entered with her silver-topped cane, her expression cold and unreadable. "Good morning, members of the board," Arthur announced smoothly, taking his position at the head lectern. "We are here to address the emergency petitions filed by Vance Capital and Sterling Enterprises." Victoria stood up instantly, bowing slightly toward Eleanor. "Mrs. Vance, thank you for convening this meeting. As you know, my daughter Chloe is engaged to your nephew Julian. We simply require a routine signature from the master trustee to release our temporary operating funds." "Sit down, Victoria," Eleanor said calmly, taking her seat at the right side of the head conference table. "The trustee will address you directly." "Where is this trustee?" Julian demanded, looking around the room impatiently. "We've been waiting 20 minutes. My short-term paper matures at 9 o'clock. "The chief trustee is right here, Mr. Vance," Arthur declared, gesturing toward the private office door. I stepped out into the bright light of the boardroom, wearing my fitted charcoal suit and silk tie. I adjusted my cuffs and walked with slow, deliberate steps straight toward the vacant leather chair at the head of the obsidian table. The silence that fell over the boardroom was deafening. Chloe gasped, her eyes widening in sheer shock as her purse slipped from her lap and hit the floor. "Ethan?" Victoria staggered back against her chair, her jaw dropping open. "What is this joke? What is he doing here in a suit?" Julian slammed his fists onto the shiny table, his face flushing deep red with instant rage. "What kind of sick prank is this, Arthur? Why is this penniless beggar standing at the head of the table? Security, drag this loser out of Vance Tower immediately." "Control your tongue, Julian," Eleanor warned, her sharp voice echoing through the silent room like a whip. "You are speaking to the head of this family." "Head of the family?" Julian roared, pointing an aggressive finger at my chest. "He was a valet living in Victoria's guest house 3 days ago. He's an orphan nobody." "He is not an orphan, Mr. Vance," Arthur spoke up, his authoritative voice completely filling the room. "He is Ethan Vance, the direct blood grandson of Evelyn Vance and sole primary beneficiary of the Master Sterling-Vance Trust Fund." "That's impossible," Victoria shrieked, clutching her chest. "Evelyn died in a charity ward." "He's lying. He forged those documents. Every document has been authenticated by the probate court as of midnight, Mrs. Sterling," Arthur replied calmly, opening a leather binder. "Ethan Vance holds 100% voting control over the trust assets. Which brings us to your financial petitions." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the polished obsidian table, looking straight into Chloe's pale, trembling face. "You asked for $5 million for your boutique, Victoria, and Julian needs $40 million to cover his corporate defaults." "Ethan," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking as tears filled her eyes. "Ethan, please, we didn't know. I didn't know who you were. You knew who I was, Chloe, I said, my voice steady, cold, and quiet. I was the man who worked 16 hours a day to pay your tuition. I was the man who gave you 4 years of my life, only for you to throw me into the rain for a 5-carat ring. Ethan, darling, please, Victoria stammered, taking a desperate step toward me with outstretched hands. We were confused. Julian manipulated us. You know how much I always respected your hard work. Respect. I let out a low, bitter laugh. You called me a valet in front of 50 people, Victoria. You threw my mother's silver locket into the mud. It was a mistake, Julian yelled, though his voice shook with sudden terror as he realized the reality of his situation. Ethan, look, we're family now. We can work this out. Just sign the debt clearance. My firm will go bankrupt in 20 minutes. Your firm is already bankrupt, Julian, I said coldly. I picked up the heavy gold fountain pen sitting on the leather desk blotter and signed the official notice form resting before me. As chief trustee, I hereby deny both credit extension applications, I announced, looking around the room. Furthermore, Arthur, execute the immediate foreclosure notice on the Sterling family estate. No, Victoria screamed, dropping to her knees beside the table. You can't evict us. That is our house. It is my house, Victoria, I corrected sharply, paid for entirely by my grandfather's trust. You have 2 hours to pack your clothes and leave the property. Julian collapsed into his chair, staring blankly at the floor as his phone began ringing furiously with calls from frantic creditors. Chloe stared at me, tears streaming freely down her face, her body trembling with complete regret. You traded 4 years of genuine love for temporary gold, Chloe, I said softly, rising from the head chair. Now you have neither. I turned away from the table, stepping past the weeping Sterling family, and walked out of the boardroom into a brand new future. The heavy rain washed over the marble steps outside Vance Tower, creating a loud, steady rhythm against the glass canopy. I adjusted my charcoal wool coat as the heavy glass entrance doors opened before me. Standing beside a tall concrete pillar in the pouring rain was Chloe. Her long hair was soaked, clinging to her face, and her mascara ran down her pale cheeks in dark streaks. She looked small, shivering violently in her wet trench coat, holding her arms tightly across her chest. Ethan, she sobbed, taking a desperate, stumbling step toward me the moment she saw me walk out. Ethan, please, don't walk away. Please talk to me. I stopped on the top marble step, keeping my distance, looking down at her calmly. You shouldn't be standing out here in the rain, Chloe. I don't care about the rain, she cried out, her voice cracking as she reached up to grab my wet sleeve. I've been waiting out here for 3 hours. Ethan, please, you have to hear me out. I stepped back gently, letting her hands slip off my coat. There's nothing left to say, Chloe. The board meeting ended hours ago. I made a terrible mistake, she screamed over the sound of the rain, tears streaming down her face. Julian lied to me. He told me he loved me, but the second his company went bankrupt today, he blamed me for everything. He took his car and drove away, leaving me and my mother with nothing. Julian didn't lie about who he was, I said quietly, my voice remaining even and steady. He was always an arrogant, selfish man. You just ignored it because he had a big diamond ring and a famous last name. I was confused, Chloe begged, dropping down onto her knees on the wet marble steps, her hands folded together in desperate prayer. My mother pressured me. She kept telling me you were just a poor worker who would never give me the life I deserved. I was stupid, Ethan. I was blind, but I never stopped loving you. I looked down at her kneeling in the rain, feeling a strange mix of quiet pity and deep sorrow. If you loved me, Chloe, you wouldn't have laughed when your mother called me a valet. You wouldn't have stood by Julian while 2 guards dragged me into the mud. I regret it, she wept loudly, shivering as the freezing rainwater soaked through her clothes. Every single second of it. Please, Ethan, give me one more chance. I don't care about the money or the mansion. We can go back to our small apartment. I'll work 2 jobs. I'll do whatever you want. We can't go back, Chloe, I said softly, reaching into my inner coat pocket. That apartment is gone. The man who worked 16-hour shifts for you is gone too. I pulled out the old silver locket, the only thing my late mother had left me. I crouched down in front of her, taking her trembling, freezing hand, and placed the silver locket gently into her palm, folding her fingers over it. What is this?" she asked, her voice shaking violently as she stared at the metal in her hand. "That locket holds a picture of my mother," I whispered, looking into her tear-filled eyes. "She taught me that real love is about sacrifice, loyalty, and standing by someone when they have nothing. I brought that locket to your gala 4 days ago because I wanted to offer you my whole life." Chloe clutched the locket against her chest, sobbing uncontrollably as fresh tears poured down her face. "Ethan, please, keep it," I said, standing back up to my full height. "Let it remind you that honest love cannot be bought with a 5-carat diamond. I hope you find peace, Chloe, but my life moves forward from here." I turned my back on her cries and walked down the marble steps toward the waiting black Maybach parked along the curb. Arthur held the rear passenger door open for me, bowing slightly as I stepped inside the dry, warm interior. "Where to, Mr. Vance?" Arthur asked smoothly, closing the door and getting into the front passenger seat. "To the main tower," I replied, looking out the dark-tinted window as the car pulled away into the rainy Chicago evening, leaving Chloe behind in the rearview mirror. An hour later, the rain finally cleared, leaving the night sky crisp, clear, and sparkling with millions of urban lights. I stood on the private penthouse balcony of the new Sterling-Vance global headquarters, 50 stories above the bustling streets. Marcus stepped out through the glass sliding doors, wearing a relaxed black polo shirt, holding 2 glasses of sparkling apple cider. "They're calling it the biggest corporate shift in Chicago history, man," Marcus said with a wide grin, handing me a glass. "Julian's family firm filed for complete Chapter 7 bankruptcy 20 minutes ago, and Victoria's boutique property went up for auction." "It's over, Marcus," I said, taking a quiet sip of my drink as the cool night wind blew past us. "The whole debt is cleared. How do you feel, Ethan?" Marcus asked, leaning his elbows on the balcony railing beside me, looking out at the city skyline. "After everything, do you feel like you got your revenge?" "It was never about revenge, Marcus," I answered, looking up at the bright stars shining above the skyscrapers. "Revenge keeps you chained to the people who hurt you. This was about taking control of my life and honoring my mother's memory." "Well, you definitely did that," Marcus said, bumping his glass against mine with a proud smile. "To Ethan Vance, the guy who built an empire out of ashes." "To the future, Marcus," I corrected, a genuine, warm smile finally spreading across my face. "A future built on truth, strength, and genuine pride."